It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the Westfield Mall was packed with families, shoppers, and people enjoying their weekend. The food court was filled with the smell of freshly baked pretzels, coffee, and burgers sizzling on the grill. Kids ran around excitedly, dragging their parents toward toy stores and candy shops. Officer Daniels walked through the mall, his eyes scanning the crowd like he always did. He wasn't just there for security. He genuinely liked being around people. Over the years, he had gotten to know many of the regular visitors. Some waved at him, and others simply smiled as he passed by. He always made sure to wave back, especially at kids, because he knew how much they admired police officers. As he turned a corner near the big fountain, he noticed a little girl standing a few feet away. She was around 8 years old, wearing a pink hoodie and jeans, with her light brown hair tied into a ponytail. She had bright eyes and a curious face. She looked at him for a moment, and then lifted her small hand, waving at him. Daniel smiled and waved back without thinking much about it. But just as he was about to walk away, something caught his attention. The girl's smile had faded almost instantly after he waved. Her expression changed, and she glanced nervously at the man standing beside her. It was a tiny change, but Daniels had spent years reading people's body language, and this wasn't normal. The man next to her was tall and wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, even though it wasn't cold inside the mall. He held the girl's wrist tightly, but not in a playful or protective way. It seemed too firm, too unnatural. Daniels felt a small knot in his stomach. Something wasn't right. Lily, the little girl, looked at him again, this time with wide eyes. She didn't say anything, but there was something in her gaze, something pleading. She gave a small shake of her head, almost unnoticeable, but Daniel saw it. It was quick, just a slight movement, but it was enough. His mind raced. Was this her father? Her guardian? Or was something else going on? He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now, every instinct told him that Lily wasn't safe. He knew he had to act fast, but he couldn't just jump to conclusions. If he was wrong, he could scare a family for no reason. If he was right, this girl's life might depend on his next move. Taking a deep breath, Daniels adjusted his belt and stepped forward, keeping his expression calm. He had to handle this carefully. If the man was dangerous, he couldn't let him know that he was onto him. He needed to get closer, observe more, and most importantly, find a way to make sure Lily was okay. As he walked toward them, the man noticed him coming and shifted slightly, as if preparing to leave. Daniels knew he had to be smart. He only had a few seconds to figure out what to do next. Officer Daniels kept walking toward the little girl and the man beside her. He didn't want to seem too obvious, so he acted casual, just like he always did when patrolling the mall. But inside, his mind was racing. He had spent years watching people, reading their movements, and noticing the little things that others missed. Right now, something felt wrong, and he couldn't ignore it. The girl, Lily, looked at him again. Her eyes were filled with something that wasn't quite fear, but it also wasn't comfort. It was as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. The man beside her shifted slightly, pulling her a little closer, and Daniels noticed how tense he became. That small reaction made the officer even more certain that something wasn't right. He decided to test the situation. Instead of stopping directly in front of them, he walked a little past and pretended to check something on his radio. Then he turned his head slightly, watching them from the corner of his eye. He wanted to see how they reacted when they thought he wasn't paying attention. The man quickly whispered something to Lily, and she nodded, but her movements were stiff, like she was nervous. Daniels noticed her hands. They were clasped together tightly, her small fingers gripping each other as if she was trying to hold in her emotions. That was enough for him to make his next move. Turning back around, he smiled at the little girl. "Hey there, kiddo," he said in a friendly voice. "Everything okay?" Lily opened her mouth as if to say something, but before she could, the man spoke for her. "She's fine," he said quickly. His voice was calm, but there was a slight edge to it, as if he didn't like the officer talking to her. "She's my niece. We were just about to leave." Daniels nodded, but he wasn't convinced. He had met plenty of families in the mall before, and most adults didn't feel the need to explain things so quickly. Usually, parents would smile and let their kids answer, not rush to speak for them. He decided to push a little further. "That's great," he said, keeping his voice light. "What's your name, kid?" Lily hesitated. She looked up at the man beside her as if waiting for permission to answer. That hesitation made Daniel's stomach tighten. If this was really her uncle, why would she need permission to say her own name? Before she could respond, the man let out a small laugh. "Like I said, she's just shy," he said, patting her shoulder. "We should really get going now." Daniels didn't move. His training told him that when people were guilty of something, they always wanted to leave the situation as quickly as possible. Right now, this man wanted to leave, and that made the officer even more certain that he couldn't let them walk away. Still keeping his friendly expression, he nodded slowly. "No problem," he said. "Before you go, can I have a quick word with you? Just routine, nothing serious." The man's grip on Lily's wrist tightened just a little before he let go. His eyes flickered to the exits for the briefest second. That was all Daniels needed to see. This man wasn't planning to stay. He was planning to run. And Daniels knew he had to be ready for whatever happened next. Officer Daniels could feel the tension in the air. The man's reaction told him everything he needed to know. He didn't want to talk. That was never a good sign. People who had nothing to hide usually didn't mind answering a few simple questions. But this man, he looked like he wanted to get away as fast as possible. Daniels took a step closer, but he kept his body relaxed. He knew that if he made the man feel cornered too soon, things could go wrong quickly. Instead, he kept his tone friendly, as if he was just making conversation. "It'll only take a minute," he said. "Where are you two headed?" The man forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just going home," he said. "Like I told you, she's my niece. We were shopping, but we're done now." Lily stayed silent. She kept looking at Daniels, her lips slightly parted like she wanted to speak but was too afraid to. That tiny detail made the officer even more sure that she needed help. Daniels nodded slowly. "That's nice," he said. "What's her name?" The man hesitated, and that small pause told Daniels everything. A real uncle wouldn't have to think about his niece's name. But before the officer could say anything, the man answered, "Emma." Daniels turned to the girl. "Is that your name?" he asked gently. Lily blinked. Her fingers twisted the hem of her hoodie nervously. She didn't look at the man beside her. Instead, she gave a tiny shake of her head. The man laughed quickly, but there was something forced about it. "She's just being shy," he said again. "She gets like this around strangers." Daniels could see sweat forming at the man's temple. He was getting nervous. And when nervous people felt trapped, they sometimes did dangerous things. Daniels had to keep the situation calm, but also make sure the girl didn't go anywhere with this man. He pulled out his notepad and pretended to write something down. "No problem," he said, still acting casual. "I just need to confirm a few details. You got any ID on you?" That question made the man freeze. For a split second, panic flickered in his eyes. His hand twitched slightly, like he was considering his options. Daniels noticed everything. Then, in an instant, the man made his decision. Without warning, he let go of Lily's wrist, turned on his heel, and bolted. Daniels was ready. The moment the man ran, the officer sprang into action. "Stay here," he told Lily firmly before taking off after the man. Shoppers gasped as the sudden chase began. The man weaved through the crowd, pushing past people in a desperate attempt to escape. But Daniels was trained for this. His feet pounded against the tile floor as he chased after the suspect, his focus locked on the fleeing man. Lily stood frozen in place, her heart racing. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, She felt like someone was finally listening. The mall instantly turned into chaos. People gasped and moved aside as the man sprinted through the crowd, knocking over a display of clothes in his rush to escape. Shoppers turned their heads, confused and startled, as Officer Daniels chased after him, his footsteps quick and steady. He had been in situations like this before. He knew he had to stay focused. The man dodged past a group of teenagers and ran toward the food court. His hood fell back, revealing his short, messy hair. He glanced over his shoulder, his face filled with panic. Daniels was closing the gap. Fast. "Stop right there," Daniels shouted, his voice firm and clear. But the man didn't stop. He kept running, pushing through the maze of tables and chairs. Daniels knew he couldn't let the suspect reach an exit. If he got outside, it would be much harder to catch him. Thinking quickly, the officer reached for his radio. "Suspect fleeing on foot through the food court," he called in. "Male, dark hoodie, moving toward the east exit." Almost immediately, the voice of another officer crackled through the radio. "Copy that. Heading to east exit now." Daniels pushed himself harder, his muscles burning as he ran. The suspect knocked over a tray from someone's table, spilling fries and drinks everywhere, but he didn't look back. He was desperate to escape. But Daniels had been in the force long enough to know one thing: people who ran always got tired. And the moment they did, that's when they got caught. The suspect's pace was slowing, just slightly, but Daniels noticed. His breaths were becoming heavier, his movements less sharp. He was getting tired. Then, suddenly, the man made a sharp turn toward a side hallway that led to the restrooms. Daniels smirked. Bad choice. That hallway had no exits. He sprinted in after him, heart pounding. When he turned the corner, the man was already reaching for the restroom door, trying to disappear inside. But Daniels wasn't going to let that happen. With one final push, he lunged forward and grabbed the man's arm, pulling him back before he could slip away. The suspect struggled, twisting and turning, but Daniels held on tight. "Let me go," the man shouted, but Daniels was stronger. He quickly turned the man around, pinning his arms behind his back. "Not happening," Daniels said firmly as he secured the handcuffs around the man's wrists. The suspect panted, out of breath, his escape plan completely ruined. Another officer rushed in, just in time to assist. "Got him?" he asked. Daniels nodded. "Yeah, he's not going anywhere now." The suspect let out a heavy sigh, knowing he had lost. Daniels pulled out his radio again. Suspect in custody. Now, there was only one thing left to do: go back and make sure Lily was safe. Officer Daniels took a deep breath as he tightened the handcuffs around the suspect's wrists. The man had stopped struggling now, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. His attempt to escape had failed, and he knew it. Daniels had seen this look before, the moment when a suspect realizes there's no way out. "Why were you running?" Daniels asked calmly, but the man didn't answer. He just looked down at the floor, his jaw clenched. The second officer, Officer Carter, gave Daniels a nod. "I'll take him to the security office," he said. "You should check on the girl." Daniels nodded. That was his main concern now. He turned and jogged back the way he came, moving quickly but carefully through the mall. Shoppers were still talking about the chase, some looking at him as he passed. But he ignored the whispers. He only cared about one thing: Lily. As he neared the spot where he had left her, he felt his heart beat a little faster. Was she still there? Had she run away in fear? Or worse, had someone else taken her while he was chasing the suspect? Then he saw her. Lily was exactly where he had left her, standing near a bench. A woman, probably a shopper, was standing next to her, talking gently to her. Lily looked up as Daniels approached, and her face filled with relief. "You're back," she said in a quiet voice. Daniels knelt down so he was at her eye level. "I told you to stay here, and you did a great job," he said, giving her an encouraging smile. "Are you okay?" Lily nodded slowly, but her hands were still gripping the hem of her hoodie. She looked nervous, but there was also something else in her eyes. Trust. She knew she was safe now. "Who was that man?" Daniels asked gently. "Do you know him?" Lily hesitated, then shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He told me I had to go with him. He said my mom sent him, but I knew he was lying." Daniels felt a chill go down his spine. He had suspected this was a case of a stranger trying to take a child, but hearing it from Lily made it real. If he hadn't noticed her wave, if he hadn't trusted his instincts, she might have been taken. "Where's your mom now?" he asked. Lily looked around, worry crossing her face. "She was shopping," she said. "I lost her when we were in the big store with all the clothes." Daniels nodded. "Okay, don't worry. We're going to find her, okay?" Lily gave a small nod. For the first time since this all started, she didn't look scared. She looked like she believed him. Daniels stood up and grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, I need an announcement over the mall intercom," he said. "We have a lost child, 8-year-old girl. Name is Lily. Her mother is somewhere in the mall." The response came quickly. "Copy that, officer. We'll make the announcement now." As he waited, Daniels glanced down at Lily and smiled. "You were really brave today," he told her. Lily smiled back, just a little. "I knew you would help me," she said. And at that moment, Daniels knew that one small wave had saved this little girl's life. Officer Daniels stood beside Lily, keeping a watchful eye on her as they waited. The mall's intercom system had just made the announcement. "Attention shoppers, we have a lost child near the central fountain. Her name is Lily. If you are her parent or guardian, please come to the area immediately." Daniels looked down at Lily, who was gripping the sleeve of her hoodie tightly. "Your mom will be here soon," he assured her. "You did the right thing by staying in one place." Lily gave him a small nod, but her eyes still searched the crowd. Her mother could be anywhere, and she probably had no idea what had just happened. Daniels could only imagine the panic he would feel hearing her daughter's name over the mall speakers. A few minutes passed, and then, through the crowd, Daniels saw a woman running toward them. Her face was filled with worry, her shopping bag swinging as she pushed past people. "Lily," the woman called out. Lily's face lit up. "Mom," she cried, and before Daniels could say another word, she ran straight into her mother's arms. The woman knelt down, hugging Lily tightly. "Oh my goodness, baby, I was so scared. Where did you go?" Her voice was shaking, and Daniels could hear the fear in it. Lily clung to her, her little fingers gripping her mother's jacket. "I got lost," she said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Then a man. He tried to take me." Her mother froze. Slowly, she pulled back, her face full of shock. "What?" Daniels stepped forward, keeping his voice calm. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Daniels. Your daughter was approached by a man who claimed you sent him, but she knew he was lying. I stopped him before he could take her." The woman's face turned pale, and she hugged Lily even tighter. "Oh my God, I was just in the dressing room for a minute. And when I came out, she was gone." She looked up at Daniels, her eyes filled with both fear and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Daniels nodded. Lily was very smart. She waved at me, and that's how I knew something was wrong. He turned to the little girl. "You did everything right, Lily. You didn't go with him, and you got my attention. That was really brave." Lily smiled just a little, still holding on to her mom. The woman wiped her eyes, still trying to process what had almost happened. "What about the man? Where is he?" Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "He's in custody. We'll be investigating further, but it looks like this wasn't his first time trying something like this." The mother shuddered at the thought. She hugged Lily again, as if afraid to let go. "I can't believe this," she whispered. Then she looked at Daniels again. "I don't even know how to thank you." Daniels smiled kindly. "Just keep an eye on her, and remind her that she did the right thing." The mother nodded quickly. I will. I'll never let her out of my sight again. Daniels glanced at Lily one last time. She looked safer now, surrounded by the person who loved her most. And in that moment, he felt a sense of relief. Because today, one small wave had saved a life. Lily's mother kept her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter, as if afraid to let go. She kept whispering soft words into Lily's ear, reassuring her that she was safe now. Officer Daniels stood nearby, giving them a moment, but he knew there was still more to do. Lily's mother looked up at him, her eyes still filled with worry. What happens now? She asked. Will he be able to do this again? Daniels shook his head. Not if we can help it. He's in custody, and we're going to investigate. If he's done anything like this before, we'll find out. The woman swallowed hard and nodded. I never thought something like this could happen to us. We were just out shopping like any normal day. She glanced down at Lily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'd always told her not to talk to strangers, but I never thought. Her voice cracked, and she took a deep breath. Daniels gave her a reassuring look. You're not alone in this. A lot of parents think these things only happen far away, to other people. But the truth is, it can happen anywhere. What's important is that Lily knew something was wrong, and she found a way to ask for help. Lily looked up at him, her small fingers still clutching her mother's jacket. You helped me, she said softly. Daniels smiled. You helped yourself first. You were smart, and that made all the difference. Just then, another officer walked up. It was Officer Carter, the one who had helped with the arrest. He nodded at Daniels before turning to Lily's mother. Ma'am, we'd like to ask you a few questions at the station. It's just routine, so we can make sure we have everything we need to keep this man off the streets. The mother hesitated but then nodded. Of course. Anything you need. Daniels turned back to Lily. Would you be okay coming with your mom to the station for a little bit? We just need to make sure everything is written down so we can stop this from happening again. Lily looked at her mom, then back at Daniels, and nodded. Okay. Her mother took her hand, holding it tightly. We'll go together, she promised. Daniels led the way as they walked toward the mall's security office, where a car was waiting to take them to the station. The other shoppers had gone back to their day, but Daniels knew that what had happened here was something none of them would forget. As they stepped outside, Lily tugged at Daniels' sleeve. He looked down at her, and she gave him a small, shy smile. Thank you, she said again. Daniels smiled back. You're welcome, kiddo. And in that moment, he knew that no matter how tough his job could be, moments like this made it all worth it. The ride to the police station was quiet. Lily sat close to her mother in the back seat, her small fingers gripping her mom's hand tightly. Officer Daniels glanced at them through the rearview mirror. He could tell Lily's mom was still shaken, her other hand pressed against her chest as if she was holding back tears. When they arrived at the station, Officer Carter met them at the entrance. We'll take you to a private room, he said kindly. We just need a few details. Lily's mother nodded, and they followed the officers inside. The police station was busy, with officers moving around, phones ringing, and reports being filed. But Daniels led them to a quiet room, where they could sit and talk without distractions. Lily sat next to her mom on the small couch. She looked tired but calm, no longer scared like before. Daniels took a seat across from them and pulled out his notepad. Lily, he said gently, can you tell us everything that happened from the moment you got separated from your mom? Lily nodded and took a deep breath. We were in the store with all the clothes. Mom went to try something on, and she told me to stay close. I was looking at a jacket, and when I turned around, she was gone. Her mom covered her mouth, guilt filling her eyes. I was only in there for a few minutes, she whispered. Daniels gave her a reassuring nod. It happens, but let's hear what happened next. Lily continued. I started walking around, looking for her. Then that man came up to me. He smiled, and said my mom sent him to get me. She frowned, but I knew he was lying. Mom never told me someone else would come. Daniels nodded, impressed by her awareness. That was really smart, Lily. Lily's mother squeezed her daughter's hand tightly, listening intently. Lily went on. He grabbed my wrist and started walking fast. I wanted to run, but I was scared. She glanced at Daniels. Then I saw you, and I remembered that my teacher said if I'm ever in trouble, I should get the attention of a police officer. Daniels smiled. Your teacher gave you great advice. Lily nodded. I waved at you because I didn't know what else to do. Daniels wrote a few more notes before looking at her mother. You have a very smart daughter, he said sincerely. Tears filled Lily's mother's eyes. I almost lost her, she whispered. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if you hadn't been there. Daniels shook his head. You got her back. That's what matters. Just then, another officer knocked on the door and stepped inside. The suspect is being processed. Turns out he's wanted for similar cases in another state. Thanks to Lily's quick thinking, we might have just stopped him for good. Lily's mother let out a shaky breath of relief and hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, she said, looking at Daniels. For everything. Daniels smiled. Just doing my job. But Lily, she's the real hero today. Lily looked up, a small smile on her face. I just did what I thought was right. Daniels chuckled. And that's what makes you brave. As they finished up, Daniels walked them outside. The night air was cool, and Lily leaned into her mother's side, finally safe where she belonged. As they left, Daniels stood watching them for a moment, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had responded to many calls in his career, but this one would always stay with him. Because today, a simple wave had changed everything.